Hi. How are you, Laura? Thank you so much for joining. It's very awkward to be the only person with a camera. So thank you for those of you who are coming in. I do know we ran late. I just left, and I know Crystal's getting it. So we're going to give everybody about 3 more minutes to make sure that we can give them time to network, and then we'll get started. All right. So if you need to take a quick break, anybody needs to do it. I still have my dinner here, and whatever you need to do, let's plan for at 36 minutes after the hour. In 2 more minutes, I'll get started just so that we can keep on track. I will tell you that in order to help everybody with this session, one of the things I'm going to be doing is using a interactive document, and I'm going to pull up that page for you in just a moment, so that you can see exactly what I will be sharing. And it looks like this. And so this is using Mentimeter. And so in just a few minutes, I'll be reminding folks, and as others are joining in, there's a little code, and you can also use the QR code over here to scan. It's totally up to you. The purpose behind the Mentimeter is so that we can have a little interactivity with it, and I can collect a little bit of information to help make this efficient for you. So as you come in, if you're just joining now, you'll see that it says menti.com. You can open that up in another tab and pull up this code, or you can use the QR code if you have a remote mobile device. And this will just give us a chance to ensure that everybody can add a little interactivity while we're going through this, since it's just my face. All right. And I see about 7 of you have joined in. This code will be up through the whole piece. So that way you can jump in at any point and let others know if I missed that. All right. So we'll get started in just 1 minute. Thanks, Justine. Pleasure seeing you again. Oh, you're here for the vibes too, Crystal. Thank you. I would love to share my dinner with you. I told you I have good stuff here. So, all right. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm going to get started, and just to keep us back on track, the screen that you're seeing me share right now has a connection through Mentimeter, which is a great tool if you've never used it before, that allows you to do interactive presentations. So you'll see at the top it says menti.com, and there is a code. If you want to open that in another tab, or you can use your mobile device and scan the QR code. And this is how I will be moving through the slides so that you can give me feedback and answer a few things while we're going through to keep it as interactive as we can. So without further ado, my name is Mark Davis. I am a white male. I have brown hair with a nice bit of gray coming in here, green eyes, and I'm currently wearing a very sharp little sweater that's orange and all that fun. I live in Seekonk, Massachusetts, southern Mass, but I teach in Barrington, Rhode Island, in the north part of the state. So when you think about where I live, it's a real tiny postage stamp, so it sounds like I'm crossing state lines, but it's a hop, skip, and a jump. And I also work for the Media Education Lab as a researcher. One of the things that we're going to be looking at tonight is the curiosity that you have, your implementation, and your conviction. I think this will kind of help frame this almost like a 3-act play. And so in our major part of what we're doing here is trying to make the connection to the humans and AI aspect of the AI learning priorities for all K through 12 learners. And this was work that we just did and will continue to be doing in the Responsible AI Fellowship, which I'm a part of. And we were in New York and had a really great time preparing for this. So again, if you haven't joined, the Menti link is at the top, and in the lower corner is the QR code. And what I want to just kind of gauge the room is if you could say, how are you feeling about artificial intelligence in education right now? So if you are following this on Menti, What you do is you'll see when it comes up, and I'll just give you kind of a little sample of it. It allows you to select where you kind of fit, and then what you're seeing down on my screen is in real time the feedback that we've got from several people. And I'm a data analyst. I love infographics and I love visualization and data. And so this is called a spidergram, and it's kind of quickly helping us gauge from the center out where people are. So right now we're at about a 3.8 in the curious but uncertain category. But we've got a nice little mix because the triangle is kind of spreading out. If it went in a straight line in one direction, we'd have a very, you know, kind of homogenous group. But it sounds like we have some folks who are excited and confident and mostly overwhelmed. And I can't imagine why in the month of December. So I appreciate that. Thank you so very much for giving me kind of a little place to start. What we're going to be looking at in this first part about curiosity is the idea that it's okay that you're going to have this feeling that you don't fit, you don't understand, because I really want to focus on you as a teacher, as an educator, as a community member, an instructional coach, an administrator, because so many great lessons and materials are out there. How do we teach this to students? And part of the Humans in AI talks about the human role of creating AI, and you are that human. And a lot of times I find that people consider themselves to not be, an expert in the field. And that's something that goes back to a 1970s study known as the Imposter syndrome. And the idea was that a lot of us feel like we're a fraud or a Luddite that can't fully grasp the information that's in front of us and become an expert, when in fact, all the evidence shows the contrary, that we're actually very knowledgeable, we're willing to grow, that we may have good experience in this. So the imposter syndrome really plays out hard in the the climate around AI, because a lot of people feel like other people know more about this. Other folks are using it on a regular basis. Am I outside of that piece? And I'm here to show that tonight, as an educator, you have that and give you some tools to help you build your confidence in making it work well. So what it sounds like, the kind of talk that I hear, especially among my educator friends and others, is some people will say, well, I should already know more about this. They feel like somebody should have provided some professional development. And to that, I say that, well, AI is evolving daily, but no one knows all of it yet. So you have nothing to worry. Others are saying my students and peers probably know more than me. And it's true that some people will know more apps just as others would, but you know how to learn and you know how to think critically. So you're perfectly capable of doing this. Some people think real tech people code, and I'm just describing things. I'm going into a prompt and I'm telling it to do something. And I'm here to tell you that describing that, doing that well, which is called prompting, is something that you are naturally a born leader to do because you're an educator and you try to teach others how to do that work. Some people are saying that they're feeling it's harmful or unethical or it's taking away jobs. And I would cite that the evidence isn't there yet for that kind of belief, that it's really about being transparent and collaborative, and that work, if we are able to mitigate any of those circumstances, comes from being transparent and making sure we're citing our evidence and showing that we have skills beyond what a tool can do. And of course, finally, I see a lot of I'm getting too old or I'm starting too late to learn this. And I would say, no, small steps always count. And the most important thing you can do is never stop learning and try it. So these are myths. This is not the reality of our imposter world. So with that, I wonder, how do you feel that you are successful with AI? And the question I'm going to ask you is, I feel that I'm successful with AI when and this is an early question to lead to where we'll be at the end of this. What you do is, in your Menti, you'll have a place there to write a very brief prompt. And in real time, that prompt is going to appear on the screen so that we can hear a little feedback from all of you. And so I would say for myself, I feel that I'm successful with AI when I have found a way to do things more efficiently. I do think that AI can be a really powerful tool when I'm able to find the work that I'm doing is coming across efficiently and confidently for others to use. And so I'm just going to throw that in there, efficiently and confidently. Empowering students is a really important part of this, especially for our educators, which is cool. I like that folks often think about the product, and that's a good thing to not worry about, is that creating a product that can engage them is a challenge. One of my favorite pieces of advice that I got from a student teacher when I first started, George Nagy in Bowling Green, saw a piece that I put together using slide decks. And this was very, ahead of the curve 25 years ago, but it was something that the kids were so impressed by. And I kept wanting to do it. And two things happened that he pointed out. He said, one, how long did you spend making that? I said, oh, probably about 2-3 hours last night. And he said, big mistake, rookie mistake, because you're spending too much time on something that only provided about 10 minutes of instruction, and you don't have that kind of level of time to be that inefficient. And the second thing I noticed was that when I used those same products over and over again, I started finding that a lot of the students were getting kind of bored with it and they didn't want to see it. So being able to innovate, to gather feedback is a wonderful idea. And I do think that it can be really important for this idea of the mental block. So there's so many good things here that I'm seeing. And one of the things I can do with AI, as you're seeing on my screen, is it's taking your responses right now and it very quickly put in place here a little breakdown of what most people said. So based on that, it's creating almost like a word cloud would do, showing that student empowerment, workflow efficiency, accurate answers, and teacher collaboration were some of the strongest things that came out of your responses. And that's one of the reasons why I'm using this tool right now, is in just a few seconds, I get to hear from you. I'll have a chance to go back and see that feedback. But in real time, I can already see the categories of information that are in here. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. The next thing I want to think about is we're going to skip over the vote because I would like to move a little bit forward, is implementation. So we've talked about this issue of being an imposter, and now it's really about what can our teaching practices do to augment and enhance artificial intelligence skills. Notice I said your teaching is about augmenting, enhancing artificial, not the other way around. And that's important because one of the things I like to use with my students is something called the ACE principle. And it's meant to make an easy way to create norms or a practice that we can use across the classroom that easily identify how we want to behave as learners. And that comes in three forms: grace, space, and pace, hence the ACE principles. The grace is that you need to give yourself permission to experiment and make mistakes. And I often use this in like Socratic seminars to say the biggest block that a lot of people do is not speaking up, because their fear is, I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't want to feel like I'm not responsible and I'm able to use this. So grace is giving yourself permission to make those mistakes and recognize that part of your learning process is actually doing. You may have learned how to bake something once and it didn't turn out right, but that shouldn't discourage you from ever trying again. Space is about giving yourself the room for the curiosity that you have and doing that without judging yourself. So this is really about you as the human, as the educator, as the person behind the tool. You need to feel that your work that you're doing is something that is going to help build your learning and grow, but you need to do that without, reserving the judgment like we talked about with the imposter syndrome. And finally, pace is really about moving on your timeline and not letting others set your goals. Pace is different for everybody. We know this developmentally for students as well. So if you feel like I'm going to be behind, or the AI keeps changing and the newest models keep coming out and I'm already, obsolete, that's technology. That's something that we can't control. What we can is the time that we take to put into doing that work. And as you see in this example, I actually used Google Gemini, their Nano Banana Pro, and said, could you make me an infographic that represents this piece? Now, I'm an infographic designer myself, so I was particularly annoyed to see that it did a reasonable job of putting something together here. It put it on brand with the CSTA colors, created some iconography for it, and it put the words that I had given it directly in there. But the purpose for me was to recognize I could experiment and see where there were mistakes, because this was not the first iteration. I was comfortable with curiously seeing what's going to happen, even though I know some of my colleagues or myself and our designs may have actually informed the model for this. And I was recognizing the importance of not letting it establish that my goals are going to be put aside. So, what's the solution? One of them is called vibe coding. And this is an expression many people have heard and maybe don't fully understand. And vibe coding is the kind of cheat that people like to call it, in terms of not being a coder, but getting something created with code using AI tools. The way vibe coding works is that you are describing the problem, the circumstances, and then the computer's language model is actually designing the application. So that happens through plain language. You're writing out a prompt, and then you're saying it will look like this, and you get a model based on the tone and ideas that you want. And so that bothers people who are non-coders, that they often think, well, I don't really know the skill set yet. And that's okay, because you don't have to understand how to read Tolstoy in the elementary level. But as you get practice, you'll eventually get to a point where you can appreciate and take on more challenging text. So it can be a great start. It's wonderful for problem solving because it shifts things from rules to creativity. And that's an important step in design, is that not just being about articulating these are the semantics of the work, but how you can be more creative. And so it's about developing the parts, not the whole sum, and worrying about the final piece. And it really builds on you because it's teaching as an expertise. Your ability to explain information makes you the technical expert. And that's just the shift in paradigm in it. And the point I want you to take from that is you have the skills to augment them with AI. So, having said that, which of these skills do teachers already have that support vibe coding? You're clear communicators. You have great lesson planning designs. You have ways of delivering instruction. You know how to take complex ideas and make them easier by differentiating and chunking it for students. You understand that iteration comes from feedback. So our first practice, our first draft is not our best. And with feedback, we can check for understanding. We use the design process to build on that. So I ask you briefly, how can I feel most empowered with vibe coding? What I'm looking for is what kinds of ways would you use vibe coding to help you in the work that you do every day, whether that's with a student, with a colleague, on a team, or maybe with stakeholders like parents, the community, administration, anyone else that you would want to connect. Consider again that vibe coding is describing something that is going to then produce this product. And the concern that a lot of people have is, I don't really know how to code or how to design an image or how to put this piece together. And they feel this is that imposter moment, that if I put something through a prompt and I'm using this vibe coding to have it create a new app or something that could be really engaging and powerful, that I'm not doing the work, when in fact you are. And I'm about to demonstrate for you in just a moment what that will look like. So I appreciate the idea that practice is important. The simple apps is such a great part of what people often bring up with vibe coding, is that I may not know how to develop an app, but with vibe coding, by asking the prompt, this is what I'm looking for, I can get some really amazing structures put together that get about 90% of the project working. And that's a really good place to start and feel confident that maybe this is something worth pursuing. So I'm sure you're probably anxious. I see that you wanted to use it for preparing. I appreciate that. It is a good way to do a lot of preparations as well. And for time's sake, I'm going to just step forward because I know that we want to actually trial these. I want to show you two of the tools that don't get nearly enough attention because we all hear about ChatGPT. And one of them is Claude. And if you'd like to get to Claude, you can simply press on your search tool. You can look for Claude, or you can type in claude.ai. And what I like about Claude is that it is a wonderful tool if your concerns are around issues of ethics and the human touch. I'm not to say that Anthropic, the company behind this, is doing it better than OpenAI or Google, but one of the things that you can do is when you're creating a lesson, you can be sure that Claude is using what it calls constitutional rules. And these rules are kind of like the three robot laws that Isaac Asimov introduced almost a century ago. The idea is that it will make sure that it is keeping you and your interests at the heart of it and not just trying to get you the answers. So the example I like to say is, try designing a content-based lesson for your classroom that includes a graphic organizer. And so again, for the sake of time, I know you won't have an opportunity maybe to do this at this moment, But I'm going to give you 2 prompt suggestions, and I'm going to show you what kinds of results you can get with that. So for instance, if you're a high school ELA teacher, notice that my prompt is written out lengthy. And that's because I want to detail for it who the audience is, what style and tone I want, what details I'm looking for, what kinds of modeling I want. So if I'm trying to teach a classic novel, I need to say who that age is, who I am doing that. I want to be explicitly clear about what I want to have covered in terms of deep analysis and question taking, and make a visual organizer. This is also true if you're doing an elementary lesson where I want to clarify the age group and what kind of information I'd like to receive. So to give you an idea, I actually went to Claude ahead of time and put in an example for you so you could see it. I'm going to try and share that real quick right now so that way you have a chance to see exactly what the response was. But one of the beautiful things about Claude is it will produce, again, somewhere in the lines of like 90% of the work that you're intending. And I think that that's a really good starting place where you can feel like I can absolutely make people feel more and more confident about what I'm doing, as a place where you're being transparent. And so this is an example of the water cycle version that I put in play through Claude. What I did here was I put the prompt in, and then I get to see the process as Claude does it. So it says, sure, I can create this. One of the first things it did was it created a water cycle illustration in HTML format over here. So what you're seeing is the final version of its kind of a real simplified piece explaining the parts, kind of giving quick remember tips for the students. And then as you go further down here, it provides you with a lesson plan where we're actually doing the process, and it will explain to you, here's how we can illustrate it, not only with a diagram, but through some simple materials like Ziploc bags, water, food coloring. And then you can immediately download these documents. So this is the lesson plan spelled out. I was explicit about I want 30 minutes so I could keep it in a good amount of time. And then all of the steps are included in here. And this is just the first cycle. I would want to go through and continue to have that conversation with it because it's important that it sees how I've done. The second tool I'm going to introduce is Google Gemini, which hasn't been getting nearly enough attention. And it really does a good job of accessing a lot of databases that most people don't realize are, behind paywalls and things. That's troublesome. I do worry about that from copywriting and as a publisher. But I do recognize that a lot of information that we receive comes from taxpayer grants and research that's done that you should be able to access. So this case, I'm pretending to be the middle school teacher, and I'm ready to start an AI unit for adolescents. And what I want to do is communicate to them very quickly about important things like how I can make clear what we're going to be teaching to all stakeholders. And so I'm asking it essentially to create a marketing campaign for my parents, my fellow teachers, and others. And so as you can see, it says, sure, this is really vital. And it's kind of giving me this, tummy rub that everything is good. But what it does a really nice job of is breaking down the pace of everything for me in a way that I find to be better than when I ran it through ChatGPT, because it did a better job of organizing around what were already being used in many other resources. So the idea of the call to action and having visuals, these are all best practices that it picked up on from other places. So again, you can try this yourself. I'm not looking to run through every step of that piece, but what So sorry about that. The one thing I wanted you to really be able to see is that the importance of vibe coding is coming up with a really effective prompt. And there are a lot of great resources for this, which I'm going to share at the very end here for you to use. So the final piece I wanted in the conviction here is that you would have a chance to kind of share what you wanted to produce. But I want to just give a little last shout out to these issues of ethics and boundaries. As a middle school teacher, and I know my elementary friends would agree, one of the most painful processes of being able to use true AI in classrooms are COPA laws and data privacy. We recognize we have to protect those who we're teaching and working with. And so You really want to think closely about what are the data privacy rules that your state and your district or your organization is comfortable with, and looking closely at that with vendors. Academic integrity is the biggest thing that I hear in the secondary world, as fear that kids are cheating. I've reminded folks that when I was young, we had Cliff Notes. We have people who, when Google Translate first came out, who could just simply say in Spanish, the cat is black, suddenly writing something that has past participles and heavy language in it that was clearly a result of the AI. And that we can be transparent with folks will give us our best opportunity to be honest and reliable, that the work that we're doing, whether it's ours or augmented by it, is clear. Critically evaluating it means, just like any teacher would do, you're reflecting on what your outcomes were and what you got from the students. You would do the same thing with the tool. Does it provide accuracy? Does it have bias embedded in it? And being able to acknowledge that. And we are very importantly concerned about accessibility and equity, because this is also an issue of privilege. A lot of students will only access AI if they have access to high-speed internet, these tools to get on there, and those are things that aren't being spread out equitably across the world. So before I give you a little dismissal to your next piece, I was hoping that you could just revisit this one word. And that is, now that you've had kind of a little breakdown about what vibe coding is, and that process that comes from being an imposter or thinking you are an imposter and now becoming a little bit more an expert, how do you feel? And be honest. You could be more confused. You could be really delighted. I'm curious to see what you're thinking. And just as a quick note, while you're taking a look at that, I just want to point out that we also have, at the very end of these slides, a section that will have my citations and two resources that I really, really love to share with most folks. And the first is one that I highly recommend you check out. This is an organization called Prompt Advance. And what they've done is given you a whole series of prompts that you can use with the three most notable pieces. And they're broken down into categories. Makes it so easy for you to kind of get a place to start, no matter what your subject or interest is. The second is Jeremy Kaplan. He is a director of technology at CUNY, the City University of New York, School of Journalism, and he does an outstanding job with Wonder Tools of keeping his Substack up to date with the latest and greatest. And he gives away so many free tools and subscriptions to them for people who follow him. I think he's an outstanding person to follow and will really help you on this journey to the best of your ability. And so I recognize we ran a little bit short on time. And thank you all. I'm sorry, I'm just taking a moment, catching up on those of you who are still here. Thank you so much for your feedback. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Kaplan, thank you. I'll put it in the chat too for you. Jeremy Kaplan, and his resource is called Wonder Tools. So I'll leave that in there for you. He's my guru. Friendly, fun guy. Lots on Instagram too on a regular basis. But his Substack is definitely something worth checking out. It's free for most users, but if you're willing to subscribe, give him a little, you get an unbelievable cornucopia of wonderful tools to subscribe to and check out. He's a great resource. Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Good to see you again. Thank you, Carol. I appreciate that. So apologies that it's a flash session and we're moving quick. You want to head on to your next session. I have great fellows who I know that you will enjoy. So please head over there. I'm going to go and join you as well. And again, you have my contact information. Please reach out if it can do anything for you. Take care.